I inherited an apartment building. One tenant hadn't paid rent in 30 years. I went to evict her. Check your grandfather's old ledgers, she told me. I did, and the truth made my blood run cold. I inherited an apartment building from my grandfather and discovered one tenant hadn't paid rent in 30 years. I marched up to evict her, furious about the lost revenue. Check your grandfather's old ledgers, she said calmly. Look for my name. When I did, the truth I found made my blood run cold. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let me take you back to the day I thought I was going to solve my biggest problem. The call from my grandfather's lawyer came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment, drinking instant coffee and trying to figure out how to pay next month's rent, when my phone rang with news that would change my life forever. Mr. Fisher, this is Robert Adams from Adams & Associates. I'm calling about your grandfather's estate. My grandfather, I said, confused. I haven't spoken to him in years. I understand there was some estrangement in the family, but you're listed as his sole heir. He passed away last week and he's left you his apartment building. I nearly dropped my coffee. My grandfather, William Fisher, had been a successful businessman, but our family had fallen out when I was in college. Something about my father's gambling debts and my grandfather's refusal to keep bailing him out. I'd been caught in the middle and had chosen my father's side, a decision I'd regretted as my dad's addiction destroyed our family. An apartment building? Yes, a 6-unit building in the Riverside district. It's been his primary source of income for the past 30 years. There are some papers you'll need to sign and I'll need to brief you on the property management situation. 2 days later, I found myself standing in front of a beautiful brick building in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. It was 4 stories tall with elegant bay windows and well-maintained landscaping. Even in my limited real estate knowledge, I could tell this was valuable property. Mr. Fisher, a woman in her 50s, approached me with a clipboard and stressed expression. I'm Linda Benson, the property manager. I've been handling the day-to-day operations for your grandfather. Nice to meet you, Linda. I have to admit, I don't know anything about property management. That's fine. We can work together, but there are some things you need to know right away. Linda's expression grew troubled. The building has been losing money for years, and there's one particular situation that's been problematic. What kind of situation? There's a tenant in the penthouse apartment, 4B. Her name is Paula Hendricks. She's been living there for 30 years, and she hasn't paid rent once in all that time. I stared at Linda in disbelief. 30 years without paying rent? Why hasn't she been evicted? Your grandfather always refused to discuss it. Every time I brought it up, he'd just say Paula stays and change the subject. I've tried to research the situation, but there's no lease agreement in file. No documentation explaining the arrangement. How much money are we talking about? Linda consulted her clipboard. The penthouse is our largest unit. At current market rates, it should rent for about $3,500 a month. Over 30 years, she did quick math. We're looking at over $1 million in lost revenue. My mind reeled. $1 million? That was more money than I'd ever imagined having. And it was just sitting there, uncollected, because some woman was living rent-free in my building. What's she like, this Paula? Elderly, probably in her 70s. Very private, keeps to herself. She's polite when I see her, but she never explains the rent situation. Just says it was arranged with Mr. Fisher, and leaves it at that. Well, it's not arranged with me, I said firmly. I need to talk to her immediately. Linda looked uncomfortable. Mr. Fisher, I should warn you, your grandfather was very protective of her. He left specific instructions that she was never to be bothered or harassed. My grandfather is dead, and I'm drowning in student loans and credit card debt. I can't afford to let someone live in a $1 million apartment for free just because it was some old arrangement. That afternoon, I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, my anger building with each step. The penthouse apartment had a beautiful oak door with a brass nameplate that read P. Hendricks. I knocked firmly. Just a moment came a voice from inside, cultured, calm, with a slight rasp of age. The door opened to reveal a woman who was probably in her mid-70s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and intelligent blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was dressed simply but well, in a cardigan and slacks that spoke of quiet good taste. You must be Carter, she said before I could introduce myself. You look just like your grandfather did when he was your age. Miss Hendricks, I'm here to discuss your rent situation. I assumed you would be. Please, come in. The apartment was stunning. High ceilings, hardwood floors, and large windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The furnishings were modest but elegant, antique pieces that looked well cared for, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, and artwork that suggested refined taste rather than expensive collecting. Can I offer you some tea? Paula asked, as if this were a social visit rather than an eviction notice. No, thank you. Miss Hendricks, I'll get straight to the point. I've inherited this building, and I've discovered that you haven't paid rent in 30 years. I need you to either start paying market rate immediately or vacate the premises. Paula nodded calmly, settling into a wingback chair and gesturing for me to sit across from her. "I understand your position, Carter. You've inherited a property, and from your perspective I'm a freeloader taking advantage of your family's generosity. That's exactly what you are. Before you make any final decisions, I'd like you to do something for me. Go down to the basement storage room and look through your grandfather's old business ledgers. Look for my name, Paula Hendricks, and when you find it, read the entries carefully. Why would your name be in my grandfather's business ledgers? Because 30 years ago, your grandfather and I had a business arrangement, an arrangement that I believe you'll find quite illuminating." "What kind of arrangement?" She smiled sadly. "The kind that saved your grandfather's business and built your family's fortune. The kind that made it possible for you to inherit this building in the first place." "I don't understand." "You will. Check the ledgers, Carter. Look for entries from 1993, and when you find them, come back, and we'll talk." I left Paula's apartment more confused than angry. Her calm confidence had thrown me off balance. She wasn't acting like someone who was caught freeloading. She was acting like someone who had every right to be there. The basement storage room was a maze of boxes, old furniture, and filing cabinets. It took me 2 hours to find the boxes labeled Business Records 1990 to 1995. Inside were dozens of leather-bound ledgers, each one filled with my grandfather's meticulous handwriting. I started with 1993, flipping through pages of income and expenses, rent payments and maintenance costs. My grandfather had been incredibly detailed, recording every transaction down to the penny. It was on page 127 of the July 1993 ledger that I found the first mention of Paula Hendricks. July 15, 1993. Emergency loan from P. Hendricks, $250,000. Terms, interest-free, no repayment schedule. Collateral, none required. I stared at the entry, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. $250,000, with no interest and no repayment schedule? In 1993, that was an enormous sum of money. I kept reading, finding more entries over the following months. August 3, 1993. Additional loan from P. Hendricks. $150,000. Same terms as previous. September 12, 1993. Final loan installment from P. Hendricks, $100,000. Total borrowed? $500,000. $500,000. Paula Hendricks had loaned my grandfather $500,000 in 1993 with no interest and apparently no requirement for repayment. But why? And what had my grandfather needed the money for? I found the answer in a separate ledger labeled Crisis Management 1993. The entries painted a picture of a business on the verge of collapse. My grandfather's construction company had been hit by a series of disasters. A major client had defaulted on payments, a lawsuit had drained his cash reserves, and the bank was threatening to foreclose on all his properties, including the apartment building. June 30, 1993. Bank notice. Foreclosure proceedings to begin July 31, unless $400,000 payment made. July 1, 1993. All assets at risk. Company bankruptcy imminent. July 14, 1993. P. Hendricks offers assistance. Miracle. I sat back in the dusty basement trying to process what I was reading. In 1993, my grandfather's business had been failing and Paula Hendricks had appeared like an angel offering enough money to save everything. But I still didn't understand the connection. How had she known about his troubles? Why had she been willing to lend such an enormous sum of money with no guarantee of repayment? I kept searching through the ledgers looking for more information about Paula. What I found was a series of entries that made my blood run cold. July 20, 1993. Agreement with P. Hendricks finalized. Loan terms $500,000 interest-free. Repayment, none required. Condition, lifetime residence in apartment 4B, no rent charged. July 21, 1993. P. Hendricks moves into 4B. First day of new arrangement. July 22, 1993. Bank payment made. Foreclosure avoided. Business saved. I found a manila folder tucked behind the ledgers labeled P. Hendricks Private. Inside were photocopies of legal documents and what I read there made me understand the full scope of what had happened. Paula Hendricks hadn't just been a good Samaritan with deep pockets. She had been a brilliant young investment banker who had made a fortune in the early 1990 stock market boom. At age 42, she was one of the most successful women on Wall Street. The documents told a story that took my breath away. Paula had been looking for investment opportunities when she learned about my grandfather's situation through a mutual business contact. But instead of treating it as a typical business transaction, she had structured it as something unprecedented. The loan agreement was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Paula had given my grandfather $500,000 with only one condition, that she be allowed to live in the penthouse apartment for the rest of her life rent-free. No other terms, no repayment schedule, no interest. But there was more. A handwritten note in my grandfather's writing dated July 15, 1993. Paula Hendricks is not just saving my business, she's saving my family's future. Without her intervention we would lose everything. The apartment is a small price to pay for the gift she's giving us. I will never forget this kindness and I will ensure that her generosity is honored for as long as I live. I sat in that basement for another hour, reading through years of subsequent entries. What I discovered was that Paula's $500,000 loan had indeed saved my grandfather's business. Within 2 years, he had not only recovered, but had expanded, using the breathing room Paula's money had provided to secure new contracts and grow his company. By 1995, the business was worth over $2 million. By 2000, it was worth $5 million. When my grandfather sold it in 2005, he had received $12 million, all because Paula Hendricks had believed in him when no one else would. The apartment building I had inherited, the comfortable life my family had enjoyed, my grandfather's ability to send me to college before our falling out, all of it existed because of Paula's extraordinary generosity, and I had marched up to her apartment planning to evict her. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor with a very different feeling than I'd had that morning. When Paula opened her door, she took one look at my face and nodded knowingly. "You found the ledgers." "Paula, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Come in, Carter. I think it's time we had a proper conversation." This time I accepted her offer of tea, sitting in her elegant living room while she prepared it with the calm efficiency of someone who had been expecting this moment for a long time. "You saved my grandfather's business," I said when she returned with the tea service. "I made an investment," she corrected gently, "one that paid off handsomely for your family. But you never asked for the money back, $500,000, and you just gave it to him." Paula settled into her chair, her blue eyes thoughtful. "Carter, in 1993, I was 42 years old and worth about $8 million. I had more money than I knew what to do with, but I was also profoundly lonely. I had spent 20 years building a career on Wall Street and I had sacrificed everything else for success. So why help my grandfather? Because when I met William, I saw something I had lost: integrity. He was a good man who had built an honest business, who employed dozens of people, who cared more about doing right by his workers than maximizing his profits. When I learned he was in trouble, I saw an opportunity to use my money for something meaningful." "But the apartment arrangement was my idea," Paula said firmly. "I didn't want your grandfather to feel indebted to me. I didn't want him to spend the rest of his life trying to repay money I didn't need. So I structured it as a trade, my money for a place to live." "But you could have afforded any apartment in the city." Paula smiled. "I could have, but I didn't want just any apartment, Carter. I wanted a home. I wanted to be part of a community, to have neighbors, to feel like I belonged somewhere. This building gave me that. Have you been happy here?" "Happier than I ever was in my penthouse on the Upper East Side. My grandfather became like a father to me. The other tenants became my friends. This place gave me the family I never had." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Paula, I came here to evict you. I was angry about the lost rent revenue. I had no idea what you had done for my family." "Of course you didn't. William was a private man, and he honored my request to keep our arrangement confidential. I never wanted recognition or gratitude. I just wanted a home, but the money you gave up was never money I needed. Carter, I've been living comfortably on my investments for 30 years." Over the next hour, Paula told me more about her life in the building. She had quietly helped other tenants over the years, paying medical bills for Mrs. Perry in 2A when she couldn't afford cancer treatment, covering rent for the young family in 1B when the father lost his job, funding college tuition for the teenager in 3A whose parents couldn't afford it. "You've been taking care of everyone," I said in amazement. "This building has been taking care of me for 30 years. It seemed only fair to return the favor." "Paula, I don't know how to apologize for what I said earlier. I don't know how to thank you for what you did for my family." "You don't need to do either," she said gently. "But I do have a request." "Anything. Your grandfather left you this building because he believed you had the character to honor the commitments he made. I'm asking you to let me finish out my life here, in the home I've loved for 30 years. "Of course, God, Paula, of course. This is your home. It always will be." "Thank you, Carter. That means more to me than you know." As I prepared to leave, Paula walked me to the door. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Your grandfather left detailed instructions about the building's management. He wanted you to understand not just the business side, but the human side. This building isn't just an investment, it's a community." "What do you mean?" "Look in his desk drawer when you get home. There's a letter he wrote for you, explaining his philosophy about being a landlord. I think you'll find it illuminating." That evening, I found the letter Paula had mentioned. In my grandfather's careful handwriting, it read, "Carter, you've inherited a responsibility to the people who call it home. Being a landlord isn't just about collecting rent. It's about providing shelter, security, and dignity to the families who trust you with their most basic need." Paula Hendricks saved our family when we had nowhere else to turn. She asked for nothing in return except a place to belong. Honor that arrangement, not just because it's legally binding, but because it's morally right. She gave us everything we have, but more than that, learn from her example. Use this building to build community, not just wealth. The tenants aren't just sources of income. They're neighbors, and neighbors take care of each other. I hope you'll be the kind of landlord I tried to be, and the kind of person Paula taught me to be. Money comes and goes, but the relationships we build and the kindness we show, That's what lasts. Your grandfather, William Fisher. I folded the letter carefully, finally understanding the full weight of what I had inherited. This wasn't just a building. It was a legacy of compassion and community that my grandfather and Paula had built together. Over the following months, I threw myself into learning everything I could about property management, but with a very different philosophy than I'd started with. Instead of focusing solely on maximizing profits, I followed my grandfather's example and Paula's guidance. When Mrs. Perry in 2A needed a new air conditioning unit, but couldn't afford it, I had one installed and spread the cost over her rent payments with no interest. When the young family in 1B had their second baby and needed more space, I helped them move to a larger unit in a sister building I discovered my grandfather owned, keeping their rent the same. Paula became my unofficial advisor, teaching me about the delicate balance between running a business and caring for people. She had decades of experience in both finance and human nature, and her insights were invaluable. The secret, she told me one afternoon as we reviewed the building's finances, is understanding that taking care of people is good business. Happy tenants stay longer, take better care of the property, and refer their friends. Kindness isn't just morally right, it's financially smart. She was right. Under my grandfather's compassionate management, the building had virtually no turnover. Tenants stayed for years, even decades, creating a stable income stream that more than made up for the occasional accommodation or repair. 6 months after inheriting the building, I made a discovery that stunned me even more than the original revelation about Paula's loan. While organizing my grandfather's papers, I found a folder labeled P. Hendricks Ongoing. Inside were records showing that Paula had been quietly contributing to the building's maintenance and improvements for 30 years. New roof in 1998, Paula had paid half. Elevator modernization in 2005, Paula had covered the entire cost. Heating system upgrade in 2010, again, Paula's money. She had been not just a rent-free tenant, but a silent partner in maintaining and improving the property. When I confronted her about it, she simply shrugged. "It's my home, Carter. When you love your home, you take care of it. But you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on improvements, and I've lived in a beautiful, well-maintained building for 30 years. It was worth every penny. Paula, you've been subsidizing this building, not freeloading off it. I've contributed what I could afford to contribute, just like everyone else." A year after inheriting the building, I received an offer from a development company to buy the property for $15 million. They wanted to tear it down and build luxury condominiums. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of having. I brought the offer to Paula, expecting her to be devastated at the thought of losing her home. Instead, she smiled. "Congratulations, Carter. That's a life-changing amount of money." "I'm not taking it." "Why not?" "Because this building isn't just an investment. It's a community. It's Mrs. Perry's home, and the Johnsons' home, and your home. I can't destroy that for money." Paula's eyes filled with tears. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you." I learned from the best teachers. 2 years later, I had transformed my approach to property management into a small business. I now managed 5 buildings, all with the same philosophy my grandfather and Paula had taught me, that being a landlord was about more than collecting rent. Paula had become my business partner in all but name. Her financial acumen and my grandfather's compassionate approach created a management style that was both profitable and humane. "You know," she said one evening as we sat in her apartment, reviewing plans for renovating another building I'd purchased, "I never expected my retirement to be so fulfilling." "What do you mean?" "When I left Wall Street, I thought I was done with business. I thought I'd just live quietly and read books. But working with you, helping build something meaningful, it's given me purpose again." "You've given me more than purpose, Paula. You've given me a calling." "We've given each other a second chance," she said. On the 3rd anniversary of inheriting the building, I organized a party for all the tenants. As I looked around at the families who had made this place their home, at Paula holding Mrs. Perry's new grandbaby, at the teenagers from 3A who were now in college thanks to Paula's quiet scholarships, I realized that I had inherited something far more valuable than real estate. I had inherited a legacy of kindness, a model for how business could serve humanity rather than exploit it, and a reminder that the most important investments we make are in each other. Paula had saved my grandfather's business with her money, but she had saved my soul with her example. She had shown me that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts but in the lives we touch and the communities we build. The woman I had once planned to evict had become my mentor, my business partner, and the closest thing to family I had left. And every month when I didn't charge her rent, I was reminded that some debts can never be repaid. They can only be honored through how we choose to live our lives. An absolutely powerful story about hidden generosity, the true meaning of wealth, and how acts of kindness can echo through generations. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of unexpected gratitude, silent benefactors, and the power of compassion in business moved you, please hit that like button.